After a short couple of weeks, we are once again talking about money. And I'm pretty sure that every time I have a video that's talking about money, I'm gonna start it like this. Welcome back, everybody. It is my birthday month, and I usually don't make a very big deal out of my birthday, but not this year. Being forced to not really celebrate it for 2 years, it makes you want to celebrate your birthday more. To celebrate my birthday this month, I am doing a weekly video, one video every week, as my little birthday gift to all of you. And I am very excited. I really hope that you all enjoy them and you find value in them, and they can really help you on your own burlesque journey. So I made a video a few weeks ago talking about the basics of money and how to begin to understand money in burlesque and managing money and what questions to ask and how to talk about it. You can find that video right here for you to check out if you want to look at it after this video or before to get a little bit of insight. In that video, one thing that I talked about being important is setting your own rate and having your own personal burlesque or drag or performer rate of any kind. Today I'm going to be expanding a little bit more on that. How do you even begin to talk about your money and your rate to producers, and how do you even know what to set? Before we can really dig into the nitty-gritty of what does it look like to have a rate, how do you even decide your own, I gotta come clean about something. I talk a lot in my YouTube videos and even in real life outside of YouTube about standards. And you might have some really interesting situations where you say, Cherry said that this is the standard, or that's the standard, or look at your community for the standard. And if I'm saying something like $100 per act or $200 per act or whatever I spew out, and if you look at your local community and see either people are not getting paid or people are getting paid $20 an act, then you're going to probably be really disappointed. Being realistic, there is a lot of different standards. There's some that are higher, some that are lower. It's really going to depend on your scene and your local community, and that's one thing that I try to push for quite often, is looking not even in your local community, but look beyond that. So for me, instead of my city, maybe I'll look at the Pacific Northwest, or maybe across North America, or even what does it look like in Australia and Europe, and do they have specific standards that I really like that I want to incorporate a little bit more into North America or in my local scene? Because of that, it can be very difficult to have these conversations of what is standard, what is a good rate, what is undercutting, to add to that income as well. Whether you're brand new to burlesque or if you've been around for a few years and you think, now I'm ready, it's time, I'm going to make that money, or I want to help with making that standard higher and making it so that all of us are getting paid. To begin, I've already said it and I'm contradicting myself already, but I really recommend look at your local scene and look at beyond your local scene. What are the standards? That can look anything like talking to producers or even thinking about shows you've already been in. How much have you been paid already for shows that you've performed in? Some of the shows you're guaranteed $100 per act, and there's other shows where maybe it's $75 per act, and most of our shows locally will have tips included on top of your guaranteed rate. And that's what a rate is it's not a split of the door. It's not what the producer decides. A performer rate is what you decide, and it's what you find your value at, or even if it's not your value, what you find you need to get in return from burlesque to make it worth it. If you have to take a taxi downtown every time you go to a show to perform, if you're somebody who likes to buy their own food before a show and go to a restaurant afterwards, or any of these different expenses that can add up very quickly. If you're not getting paid, you can see why it's important to get paid, even if it is a smaller amount. Otherwise, you can't sustain yourself as a performer, and you might have to miss out on networking opportunities when a lot of performers are going out after shows, or you might have to walk when you have props and heavy costumes. When you have a rate, you're able to really lock that in and solidify that you will get paid. And if you have tips on top of that, that's fantastic. Now, because of that, our rates, again, as I mentioned, are kind of all over the map right now, and especially as we get new producers. And I know many burlesque scenes and towns and cities and communities have all had the similar experience where they might have the same producers coming back and changing things up. Maybe they keep things the same, testing the water, seeing how things go. Different people are always going to have different perspectives, especially if they're from different communities or different scenes or different forms of the industry even. Somebody who might be doing burlesque and they perform once or twice a year, their perspective might be very different than somebody who it is their living, and they have to hustle and work very hard to keep going. They might have workshops and they teach classes and all of these different extra things. When you ask, make sure you're asking performers what have they been paid. Ask producers, ask different experienced performers. And so when you set your rate, what does that look like? I'm glad you asked. A rate is a per act amount. When I'm talking to a producer, if they ask me what my rate is, I will usually personally have 2 separate rates that I'll give them. For me right now, at this time of making this video, my rate is $125. And if those tips, fantastic. For 2 acts, it is $225. I personally like to give a little bit of a discount if they hire me for 2 acts. Then they can save a little bit of money. Some performers I know prefer to say, no, it's $150 or it's $200 per act. Doesn't matter how many acts I'm performing. That's totally up to you to decide. And in addition to rates, as I mentioned in my previous video talking about money, is have multiple rates. And this can be very interesting, I think, for some people, depending on the situation. It can be a lot to have 3 or 5 or 10 or however many different rates you decide to have for yourself, depending on what you do, if you teach or if you do private sessions or if you do mentoring or if you do all of these other different things. For me personally, I think you should always get paid unless you have things like sponsorship opportunities for students or discounted rates for people from marginalized communities and anything else that you want to really discount. Even if you're having like little hangouts with individuals to talk about burlesque, to give them information if they have questions for you, that technically counts as a consultation. And even though myself, I give a lot of free consultations, even now when I have rates for people to pay me for private one-on-one sessions, I still do a free, if we've never talked before, if we've never hung out, let's have a free consultation, and then you can hire me for future consultations. And when you have that many rates, even if it's 5 or 3 or 2, it can be easy to forget, especially if you are changing them, to kind of shift it to see what works for you. I'm a really big advocate for writing everything down. I have spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets and many spreadsheets with all this different information for myself, because that's how I like to organize things. You might be a little bit different. You might just have it on a piece of paper that you have on your wall. You might have your special book with information. Whatever works for you, as long as you can keep yourself organized and keep on track of everything, that's fantastic. And I did talk about this in my video as well, but if you do have private rates for like corporate events or private events, generally most performers will double or triple their rates, and that includes for holiday rates. So holidays can be anything from like New Year's to Christmas, winter holidays, Halloween, maybe Valentine's Day, anything that you consider a holiday or that is considered generally a holiday, to either you or the individuals hiring you increase your rates. And that's really how we make the money, is by working those holiday rates, by working those private and corporate events. And know that there is a demand for performers for those times. Because there's more people gathering, this is something that you might want for exposure. You can still get paid for it, but you'll get a bigger audience as well because of it. And speaking of exposure, don't work for exposure. Exposure is not pay. Exposure does not pay the bills. Saying as old as time. Exposure is how producers can either take advantage of performers. There's some really big prominent ones that we tend to see. That's really not okay, because it undermines the work that burlesque performers and producers do, and it undermines our audiences even when they go to a show expecting it to be similar to what they're used to, and they feel like they're supporting burlesque and performers and paying them by buying a ticket. Or a lot of these types of producers where they will not pay their performers, maybe they expect their performers to sell tickets, and if they don't sell a certain amount of tickets, they have to actually pay to be in that show. But they've been advertised to as, you'll have great exposure, even if a lot of those tickets that are coming might be from those performers. And there's also producers who might go to new performers because they can pay them less, because they're less experienced. The performers who've been around with more experience know about those producers and refuse to work with them, but the newer performers don't, and so they take advantage of that. And that is really, for me, one of the really big reasons why setting a rate is so important, is because it keeps you safe and it makes sure that you are guaranteed getting paid and no one's taking advantage of you. With that, moving on to the next section, how do you even talk about a rate with the producer, especially if it's for the first time? There's so many ways that you could be reached out to perform in shows. There might be producers who put out applications and it says right in the application how much you're getting paid. Maybe it doesn't say anything, and you have the right to talk to producers if you see an application that says nothing about payment before you apply, and say, hey, I would love to apply to your show. I noticed there's nothing in the application form saying knowing anything about money and payment, can you please fill me in on what payment looks like with your shows or with this show? So that's something that you can do. There's also a lot of producers who might reach out to you very officially, very formally through email and introduce themselves, say, hi, my name is Cherry Cheeks. I am the producer of House of Cheek Burlesque, and we have a show coming up. Here's show details. We would love to have you perform. And if they just reach out to you without having any applications, as soon as a producer reaches out to you and doesn't ask you to fill out an application form, then you definitely 100% have the right to say, this is my rate. My rate is $125 for one act, $225 for two acts. Or if it's a fundraiser, then maybe it's up $100 per act or $75 per act. If you're flexible, you can say that, however, I am flexible, or you can just leave it at that. Personally, I leave mine unless it's a very special situation like a fundraiser. I might say I'm flexible, depending on the producer and have I worked with them before? Have I heard things about them before? And don't be afraid to do that. There's also producers who might reach out to you very casually on Facebook, on Instagram, on social media. And I'm not the biggest fan of social media to hire performers. However, I know this is the 21st century, and I know a lot of people like to just casually hire performers that way. If that's the case, make sure you're still saving all of your conversations with producers so that both you can remember any details that were shared with you, and also so that you can remind anybody if you need to afterwards if something doesn't go how it should. It can be really scary. I know I still get that feeling, even though I've had a little bit more practice the last year or two about giving my own rates and telling producers what to expect. And even after I've been hired, if I've applied to a show and they say they are paid their performers X amount, I will double check and be like, just so to confirm, I will get paid this amount by this date. And I know a lot of us have those nerves about, am I worth this amount? Or am I being too greedy by asking for this amount? Or I might be brand new and I don't think I have the right to ask for money or ask for a specific amount of money because I don't have experience yet. Honestly, I believe that whether you're brand new or not, you should be getting paid, and it is something that just takes practice. And even as you continue to do it and get used to it, it might still be uncomfortable and you might still have these little squidgy feelings about money. I personally do. I know a lot of other performers who have similar feelings with similar experience levels to me, and even some who are way more about money than me and talk about money all the time. They still feel that, and know that you're not alone with that, and it just takes practice. And if you ever need someone to back you up or to support you, then just look up to your other community members and see if you want to workshop. You can even workshop your rates and to say, does this seem like it's fair or valid? Do I feel like I should go a little bit lower, a little bit higher? When I set my personal rates, some things that I keep in mind: who am I? As in, like, how long have I been performing burlesque? What's my experience level outside of burlesque? I have a theater background before I did burlesque. Lots of people have dance backgrounds. Some people have no experience, and that's totally okay. Having a background before burlesque can help you, and it can also hinder you because you might hide behind certain aspects. Like, you might hide behind dance, or you might hide behind acting and comedy, and it might take a little bit longer for you to get used to that burlesque aspect of your acts. So what is your experience level? What's your experience in burlesque? How long have you been performing? Are you newer? Have you been in it for a long time? Do you teach? What is your reputation in the community? Are you somebody that people regularly talk to about support or about mentorship? Do people see the work that you do? If you're pushing for certain agendas with uplifting marginalized voices or doing really good work in the community, do you have any accolades? Like, have you performed in festivals before? Have you competed? Have you won titles? A lot of this can very easily add up to classism and to saying that you are only deserving of so much money if you have these titles or if you have this experience, when that's really not true. There's many different ways to justify how you're going to set your rates and why you choose the rates that you do, but those are some things that I personally think of because of the format of my own personal shows that I produce and the values and mission statements I have in place for them. I often invite headliners and feature performers who have done community work and who have done stuff to progress the community in different ways, as well as being phenomenal performers. That's just me. There's a lot of producers who will do a lot of different hiring practices for those shows. I would love to see if you have any questions, comments. If you have your own rate, what are some things that you like to keep in mind when setting rates? Or what do you like to tell your students or other performers when they're trying to set their rates? Or if you have questions, leave them down below. I would just love to see a huge conversation because I love talking about money in burlesque and I think it's really, really important. That said, I really look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.